In my last life, this was the day my world ended. The day I found my beloved fiancé, Liam, tangled in the sheets with my sweet, doe-eyed sister, Sarah. It was the day I learned my entire life had been a meticulously crafted lie. They didn't just break my heart, they bled my inheritance dry, framed me for crimes I didn't commit, and left me to die, alone and forgotten, in a damp hospital bed. They thought they buried me, but they only planted a seed. And this time, I'm the one holding the watering can. I snapped the lipstick cap shut with a satisfying click. Showtime. I breezed into the living room where Liam was scrolling through his phone, the picture of casual betrayal. He looked up, his face breaking into that handsome, disarming smile that used to make my knees weak. Now it just made me want to test the structural integrity of his perfectly sculpted nose. "Hey, babe," he said, his voice smooth as aged whiskey. "You look amazing. Big dinner tonight?" "Something like that," I replied, grabbing my clutch from the console table. "Don't wait up. It's going to be a long night of schmoozing." I paused, letting my gaze drift over him, a perfect imitation of a loving fiancé. "Actually, I'll probably be out until at least midnight. You know how these things are." His eyes lit up with a flicker of poorly concealed excitement. "Predictable." "Oh, right. Well, knock 'em dead." "I plan to," I said, blowing him a kiss before turning away so he wouldn't see the predatory glint in my eyes. The moment the apartment door closed behind me, I pulled out my own phone. I didn't go to the elevator. I simply leaned against the wall in the hallway, my heart a cold, steady drum against my ribs. I scrolled to my sister's contact information. Sweet Sarah. I'd have to change that. My thumbs flew across the screen. Me. "Hey, Sarah, feeling a bit down today." Liam is so good at cheering people up. "Why don't you drop by the apartment? I left a bottle of your favorite wine on the counter. Make yourself at home." Kexx. I sent the text and waited. It took less than a minute for the three little dots to appear, followed by her reply. Sweet Sarah. "Oh, Ilara, are you sure? I wouldn't want to intrude." Such a master of feigned innocence. It was almost impressive. Me. "Don't be silly. What are sisters for?" I insist. "It'll be good for you, and for him. He gets so bored when I'm out." Sweet Sarah. "Okay, if you're sure." "Thanks, sis. You're the best." I know, I thought, a humorless smirk touching my lips. I really am. I didn't go to any dinner. Instead, I went to a quiet cafe 2 blocks away, ordered an espresso, and opened my laptop. On the screen, a live feed from my bedroom bloomed into view. I'd installed the camera myself last week, a tiny, discreet little lens tucked into the spine of a book on the shelf opposite the bed. The angle was perfect, a wide, damning shot of the stage I had so carefully set. I watched as Sarah arrived, saw Liam greet her with a hug that lingered far too long to be brotherly. I watched them pour the wine, their conversation stilted at first, then flowing with the ease of shared secrets. It was a sickeningly familiar play, and I was the director, producer, and sole audience member. I sipped my espresso, the bitter taste a perfect companion to the unfolding scene. This time, there would be no tears. Only a final curtain call. An hour and a half later, the main event was well underway. I closed my laptop, paid for my coffee, and walked back to the apartment building, my steps light, my mind icily clear. My heart wasn't pounding with grief or panic like the first time. It was thrumming with the exhilarating cadence of a battle won before the first shot was even fired. I let myself into the apartment quietly, slipping off my heels. The only sounds were the faint, rhythmic creaks coming from the master bedroom. I pulled out my phone, switched it to video mode, and held it up. Time for my close-up. I didn't slam the door open. I pushed it gently, letting it swing inward with a soft whisper. They didn't notice at first, lost in their sordid little world. I took a deliberate step inside, clearing my throat. Am I interrupting something? 2 heads shot up. Liam's face was a comical mask of horror, his mouth agape. Sarah, my darling sister, shrieked and tried to pull the duvet up to her chin, her eyes wide with the terror of a cornered animal. It was a beautiful sight. I smiled, a bright, dazzling thing that didn't reach my eyes. "Don't mind me," I said, my voice dripping with mock sweetness as I panned my phone camera from one panicked face to the other. I just came back from my laptop. Forgot a crucial file for my presentation tomorrow. I paused, tilting my head. Did you want some coffee? It looks like you've both had quite the workout. Alara, Liam croaked, scrambling for the sheet. It's not what it looks like. I laughed, a genuine sharp bark of amusement. Liam, darling, it looks exactly like my fiancé is sleeping with my sister in our bed. Unless you've suddenly taken up tandem interpretive dance, I'd say my assessment is pretty accurate. Sarah started sobbing, the crocodile tears she was so famous for. Elara, I'm so sorry. I don't know what came over me. I love you. Oh, I'm sure you do, I cooed, zooming in on her tear-streaked face. You love my money, my apartment, my fiancé. You're a very loving person, Sarah. I watched them fumble and stammer for another minute, capturing every delicious second of their humiliation. Then, with a final cheerful wave, I turned and walked out, closing the door softly behind me. Back in the living room, I didn't waste a second. I sat on the plush sofa where Liam had been sitting just a couple of hours earlier, airdropped the videos to my laptop, and got to work. A few quick cuts, a bit of dramatic, heart-wrenching music I downloaded specifically for the occasion, and my masterpiece was complete. I drafted a short, anonymous email, attached the video file, and sent it to a notorious city gossip blogger known for his speed and lack of scruples. The subject line, exclusive, Sterling heir's betrayal. The suggested headline in the body of the email, heiress catches fiancé and sister in betrayal of a lifetime, a story of heartbreak. I hit send. The public would see me as the tragic victim, the woman scorned. My narrative, my terms. By the time Liam and Sarah managed to get their clothes on and concoct a lie, the story would already be set in stone. The game wasn't just changed, it was a whole new sport, and I was the only one who knew the rules. It took less than an hour for the bomb to detonate. My phone started vibrating with notifications. The blog post was live. It was glorious. Within minutes, it was the top trending topic in the city. My social media was flooded with messages of support. Sarah's was a cesspool of vitriol. Liam's family name, the illustrious, untouchable Sterling dynasty, was being dragged through the digital mud. Checkmate. Liam's call came first. I let it ring. And ring. And ring. Finally, I answered, putting it on speaker. Elara, what have you done? He shrieked, his voice raw with panic. You have to take it down. My father is going to kill me. Is he? I asked, examining my nails. Seems like a problem for you, not me. I'll give you anything. Money. Just tell me your price. We're a bit past that, Liam, I said coolly, and hung up. The next call was the one I'd been waiting for, an unknown number. I answered on the first ring. Miss Vance. A deep, gravelly voice said. It wasn't a question, it was a command. Mr. Sterling, I replied, my voice smooth as silk. My office, 1 hour. The line went dead. Alistair Sterling, the patriarch, the king. A man whose name was whispered with a mixture of fear and reverence in every boardroom in the country. He was notoriously ruthless, a shark in a bespoke suit. In my past life, I had only seen him in news clippings, a remote, imposing figure. Now, he wanted an audience. Everyone, from Liam to the baying public, expected me to walk in there and walk out with a check fat enough to choke a horse. A payoff to make the little problem go away. Liam even sent me a desperate text. For God's sake, take the money, Elara. Just take it and disappear. Poor, stupid Liam. He still thought this was about money. An hour later, I walked into the lion's den. The top floor of Sterling Tower was a testament to minimalist power. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a god's-eye view of the city. Alistair Sterling sat behind a desk the size of a small island, not looking up as I entered. He let the silence stretch, a classic power move. I refused to break it. I simply stood there, waiting. Finally, his gaze lifted. His eyes were the color of steel, and they seemed to dissect me, peeling back layers to see the machinery within. He was older, more imposing in person than in pictures, radiating an aura of absolute authority. Without a word, he slid a blank check across the polished mahogany. It came to a stop a few inches from my hand. Name your price, Miss Vance, he said, his voice a low rumble. Every person has one. I looked at the check, then back at his unreadable face. I didn't touch it. A slow smile spread across my lips. My price isn't something you can write on a check, Mr. Sterling, I said softly. But you do have something I want. Alistair's eyes narrowed almost imperceptibly, the only sign that my response had registered. He was a man accustomed to compliance, to people fawning over the scraps from his table. My rejection of his check was a disruption to his universe. I pushed it back toward him, a small, deliberate shove. Let's be frank, Mr. Sterling. Your son, my ex-fiancé, has created a PR nightmare for your company. He hasn't just humiliated me, he's made the Sterling name synonymous with scandal. Right now, every rival you have is laughing. I let that sink in before continuing, my tone all business. A payoff is the worst possible move. It makes me look like a common gold digger, easily bought. It makes you look like you're cleaning up your son's mess with cash. The story doesn't go away, it just gets a price tag. It doesn't solve the fundamental problem. I leaned forward slightly, holding his gaze. You need to change the narrative, drastically. And you have a suggestion, I presume? His voice was laced with dry ice. I do, I said, the words coming out crisp and certain. Marry me. For the first time, I saw a flicker of genuine shock in his steel gray eyes. It was gone in an instant, replaced by that intense, calculating scrutiny. I had his full, undivided attention. A marriage between us, I laid out, my voice as cool as a legal brief, instantly neuters the scandal. The headlines shift from Sterling heir cheats to Sterling patriarch's shocking engagement. It shows the world that the Sterling family does not condone Liam's behavior. In fact, it's the ultimate punishment for him, public, personal, and permanent. He loses his fiancée and gains a stepmother in one fell swoop. His humiliation will be absolute. I sat back, letting him process the sheer audacity of it. It aligns my interests with yours. I become the respectable Mrs. Sterling, a symbol of the family's integrity, not its shame. In return for the protection and status of your name, I will sign the most ironclad NDA your lawyers can draft. I will hand over my controlling shares in my family's company, Vance Enterprises, to be managed under the Sterling umbrella. I will be the perfect, polished, unimpeachable wife. It's not a romance, Mr. Sterling. It's a business merger, the best deal you'll be offered all day. The silence that followed was heavy, thick with unspoken calculations. He stared at me, and I could practically see the gears turning behind his eyes. He wasn't looking at a heartbroken girl. He was looking at a reflection of himself, a ruthless strategist willing to make an unthinkable move to secure a win. Finally, a slow, almost predatory smile touched the corner of his mouth. It was terrifying and thrilling all at once. Have your lawyer contact mine, Alistair said, his voice a low growl of assent. We'll have the contract drawn up by morning. Life in the Sterling mansion was like living in a museum where all the exhibits hated you. The announcement of our engagement had detonated in the high society circles with the force of a nuclear bomb. Liam was, by all accounts, catatonic with rage. Sarah had apparently locked herself in her room, refusing to see anyone. It was a beautiful start. My new home was an imposing fortress of marble, glass, and suffocating silence. The household staff moved like ghosts, their expressions carefully blank, but their eyes filled with thinly veiled hostility. I was the usurper, the strange woman who had somehow ensnared their formidable master. Alistair and I established our dynamic immediately. It was cold, courteous, and strictly professional. We were partners in a meticulously crafted deception. We took breakfast together in a dining room that could host a state dinner, discussing stock prices and market trends over coffee. We attended galas and charity events, a united front of power and prestige, his hand a formal weight on the small of my back, my smile perfectly calibrated for the cameras. We were a well-oiled machine, not lovers. Our private interactions were limited to brief, strategic discussions in his study at the end of the day. My internal monologue, however, was a running commentary of pure snark. I mentally critiqued the soulless beige-on-beige decor. I awarded points to the maids for the creativity of their glares. I imagined what Liam's face looked like every time a news report referred to me as his future stepmother. It was these small, private joys that sustained me in my gilded cage. But I knew I couldn't just be a pretty face on his arm. I had to prove my value beyond the initial PR fix. My chance came a few weeks into our sham engagement. Trask Industries is making a move on the renewable energy sector, Alistair mentioned one evening, swirling a glass of amber liquid in his study. They're poised for a massive surge. I remembered Trask Industries from my previous life. I remembered Liam bragging about an insider tip, investing heavily, and then losing a fortune when the company was exposed for fraudulent environmental reports. The surge was a lie. No, they're not, I said calmly. Alistair raised an eyebrow. Their preliminary reports are stellar. The market is buzzing. The reports are cooked, I stated with a certainty that made him pause. Their head of R&D is about to be arrested for falsifying data. The company is a house of cards. If you want to make money, short their stock. Heavily. It's going to hit rock bottom by Friday. He stared at me, his expression unreadable. I wasn't some market analyst. I was his convenient fiancé. There was no logical reason for him to believe me. What makes you so sure? Let's call it a woman's intuition, I said with a cryptic smile. He held my gaze for a long moment, then gave a curt nod. Fine, we'll hedge our position. By Friday afternoon, the news broke. The Trask Industries scandal was everywhere. The stock didn't just plummet, it cratered, wiped out overnight. Sterling Industries, having followed my intuition and shorted the stock, made an obscene amount of money. That evening, Alistair found me in the library. He didn't say anything. He just poured 2 glasses of the same expensive whiskey he always drank and handed one to me. It was the first time he'd ever done that. A silent acknowledgement. I had proven my worth. I had earned a sliver of his respect. It was a start. My revenge against Liam and Sarah was the catalyst, but it was never the endgame. My first life wasn't just defined by their betrayal, but by my own failures. The missed opportunities, the bad decisions, the person I could have been if I hadn't been so blinded by a pathetic, one-sided love. This new life was my chance to correct all of it. The perfect opportunity arrived in the form of an email. Innovatech Solutions, Series B funding proposal. My stomach clenched. Innovatech. In my past life, it had been my baby. A small, promising tech startup I'd poured my own money into, believing in its vision. Liam had systematically convinced me it was a worthless venture, a money pit. He'd advised me to pull out, to cut my losses. I'd listened, and the company had folded a year later. What I didn't know then was that he'd used my withdrawal to scare off other investors, then tried to buy up the company's patents for pennies on the dollar for his own side hustle. Now here it was again, a ghost from my past, offering a second chance. I walked into Alistair's study that night, holding my tablet, the proposal displayed on the screen. I want to lead this investment, I said without preamble. He glanced at the screen, his expression neutral. A small fry tech firm. We have entire divisions for this sort of thing. I know the founder, I know the technology, and I know it's being undervalued, I insisted. In my first life, I corrected myself quickly, a rare slip. He didn't seem to notice. In my previous analysis of the market, I identified this as a high-growth sector. This company has the potential to dominate it if managed correctly. And you believe you can manage it correctly? I know I can, I said, my voice filled with a conviction that came from bitter experience. Let me run with it. Consider it my personal project. If it succeeds, it's a win for Sterling Industries. If it fails, the loss is negligible for you, but the failure is mine to bear. He considered it, his fingers steepled under his chin. He was testing me, I realized, seeing how far I would push, how much I believed in myself. Fine, he said finally, but you report directly to me. I want weekly progress reports, and no surprises. You'll get them, I promised. I threw myself into Innovatech with a ferocity that surprised even me. I wasn't just an investor this time, I was a partner. I spent my days at their modest office, a world away from the sterile luxury of the Sterling mansion. I worked with the engineers, streamlined their production timelines, and used my newfound sterling connections to open doors they could only have dreamed of before. I avoided every pitfall, every mistake I'd made the first time around. I was rebuilding my own legacy, piece by piece. Alistair read my weekly reports without comment, his expression giving nothing away, but I knew he was watching. I was no longer just the woman he'd married for convenience. I was an asset. And in Alistair Sterling's world, nothing was more valuable. My success with Innovatech was a declaration of war. For Liam and Sarah, it was salt in a festering wound. They saw me thriving, powerful, and allied with the one man Liam could never defy. Desperate people do desperate things, and they were the most desperate people I knew. Their plot was as clumsy as it was malicious. They decided to frame me for corporate espionage, planting fabricated evidence to suggest I was leaking Sterling Industries' secrets, specifically information about Alistair's strategies against Trask Industries to a competitor. It was pathetic, but in a world built on reputation, even a pathetic lie could be a potent poison. Meanwhile, something unexpected was happening within the walls of the gilded cage. The lines of our professional arrangement were beginning to blur. The late-night strategy sessions in Alistair's study became less formal. We'd talk about Innovatech, then the conversation would drift to market gossip, to art, to history. I was discovering the man behind the monolith, a sharp, incisive mind with a bone-dry wit. One night, I found him staring out the vast window, a photo frame in his hand. The silence in the room was different, heavier. "This was my wife, Eleanor," he said, his voice softer than I'd ever heard it. He didn't look at me. "She was the architect who designed this house. She said a home should have a view of the stars." He spoke about her for a few minutes, not with maudlin sentimentality, but with a quiet, profound grief that felt more real than anything else in that house. For the first time, my response wasn't calculated. I didn't offer a carefully crafted platitude. "She must have been incredible," I said softly. He turned then and looked at me. Really looked at me. And in that moment, the air between us shifted. It was no longer the sterile air of a boardroom. It was charged with something else, something unnamed and volatile. A connection forged not in a contract, but in a rare moment of shared vulnerability. The very next day, the trap sprang. I was summoned to the study. Alistair was behind his desk, his face a mask of cold fury. Liam and Sarah stood to the side, a tableau of faux concern. On the desk between us was a folder. "Explain this," Alistair said, his voice flat and deadly. He pushed the folder towards me. It was filled with the evidence. Forged emails, fabricated call logs, all pointing to my supposed betrayal. I looked from the folder to his face. "This is a lie?" "Is it?" he asked, his voice laced with ice. "It seems rather convincing." My heart, which I thought had been hardened into a diamond, felt a sharp, agonizing sting. It was absurd. I had married this man for revenge, for power. His opinion of me shouldn't have mattered, but it did. The thought that he could believe this, that he could believe me capable of such a cheap betrayal after everything, it hurt. With a sickening lurch, I realized I had started to care what he thought. "Get out," he said, his voice low and dismissive. I walked out of that room with my head held high, but inside, I felt a chilling sense of failure. The one thing I hadn't planned for, the one variable I hadn't accounted for, was my own heart. I believed I had lost his trust, the one currency that had started to matter more than money or revenge. The family meeting was staged for maximum drama. Alistair had summoned us to the main drawing room, a cavernous space with a fireplace large enough to stand in. I stood by the window, staring out at the manicured gardens, my reflection a pale, composed ghost on the glass. Liam and Sarah were seated on a velvet sofa, practically vibrating with smug anticipation. They thought they had won. They thought they had finally cut me down. Alistair entered the room, the folder of evidence in his hand. He didn't look at me. He paced before the fireplace, the silence stretching until it was taut as a wire. "I have been presented with evidence," he began, his voice echoing slightly in the vast room, "suggesting that my fiancée, Ilara, has been leaking sensitive company information to a competitor." Liam shot a triumphant smirk in my direction. Sarah arranged her face into a mask of sorrowful disappointment. The performance was nauseating. Alistair laid out the contents of the folder on the grand piano, spreading the fabricated emails and call logs for all to see. He detailed the accusations with cold, clinical precision. For a moment, even I felt a sliver of doubt. His act was flawless. Then he turned his gaze slowly from the papers to his son. "The thing about setting a trap," Alistair said, his voice dropping to a dangerously soft level, "is you have to be smarter than your target. And you, my son, are not." The smug look on Liam's face evaporated, replaced by confusion. "Father, what are you talking about? The evidence is right there." "Oh, this?" Alistair gestured dismissively at the papers. "This is amateur hour. Did you really think I wouldn't have my own security team vet something like this? Did you think I wouldn't notice the inconsistencies in the server logs, the clumsily forged timestamps?" He walked over to a side table and picked up a different tablet. He tapped the screen, and a video began to play on the large television mounted over the fireplace. It was security footage, grainy black and white footage from a camera in the hallway outside the study. It clearly showed Liam and Sarah conspiring, followed by Liam slipping into the study late at night to plant the folder on his father's desk. Sarah let out a strangled gasp. Liam's face went white. "My coldness towards you," Alistair said, finally looking at me, a silent apology in his eyes, "was a performance. I needed them to believe they had succeeded, to become overconfident." He wasn't finished. He swiped to another file on the tablet. "And in their overconfidence, they got sloppy. My investigation into this little stunt uncovered something far more interesting." He projected a series of financial statements onto the screen. "It appears the two of you have been embezzling funds from a subsidiary company for the past 6 months. A fact I might have overlooked had I not been prompted to look in the right place." His eyes met mine again, a shared secret passing between us. The information about the subsidiary was a detail I remembered from my past life. A loose thread I had subtly fed to his head of security a month ago, trusting that Alistair's formidable machine would do the rest. The fall was as swift as it was brutal. Liam and Sarah were utterly exposed. There was no defense, no escape. Liam started shouting, a pathetic, desperate tirade. Sarah just sat there, broken and silent, the tears on her face real for the very first time. "Security will escort you off the premises," Alistair stated, his voice devoid of all emotion. "Your accounts will be frozen. You are no longer part of this family. A car will take you to your mother's. The legal charges will be filed in the morning." I watched them being led away, two shattered remnants of my past life. I expected to feel a surge of triumph, a fiery wave of vindication. Instead, I felt quiet, a calm, final sense of closure. That door was closed. That debt was paid. And I had not been consumed by the fire. With the internal rot excised, the atmosphere in the mansion lightened. The staff's glares softened into something approaching respect. My partnership with Alistair, now tested and proven, settled into a new rhythm of genuine collaboration. The sham was gone, replaced by a complex, unspoken truth. A few days after Liam's spectacular implosion, Alistair summoned me to the study. This time, the mood wasn't triumphant. It was grim. "Liam and Sarah were not the masterminds," he said, getting straight to the point. "They were pawns. Stupid, greedy pawns, but pawns nonetheless." He turned his monitor toward me. On the screen was a dossier of a man I vaguely recognized from business journals, Marcus Thorne, the CEO of the competitor company they had supposedly been leaking information to. "Thorne has been trying to undermine Sterling Industries for years," Alistair explained. "His father and my father were rivals, a bitter history. He saw an opportunity in Liam's weakness and Sarah's greed. He covertly fed them the idea, likely providing them with the tools to create the fake evidence, hoping to sow chaos and drive a wedge between us. If I had disowned you, he would have swooped in to pick up the pieces, and your Vance Enterprises shares." Suddenly the board was bigger, the game more dangerous. Liam and Sarah had been a sideshow. Marcus Thorne was the main event. He was smarter, more patient, and far more ruthless than my former fiancé could ever dream of being. "Our marriage contract is now irrelevant," Alistair said, his eyes locking onto mine. "This is no longer a PR problem. Thorn is a genuine threat to the company and to us. He was right. This was real. We began working together as true equals. My nights were no longer spent alone in my cavernous bedroom, but in the warm glow of the library, mapping out strategies with Alistair. We pooled our knowledge, his decades of experience and immense power with my strange, inexplicable foresight from a life lived before. The late-night sessions became less about business and more about survival. We argued over tactics, celebrated small victories, and in the quiet moments between, a real, undeniable intimacy began to bloom. The touch of his hand as he passed me a document, the way his eyes would crinkle at the corners when I made a particularly snarky comment, the shared smiles over a successfully thwarted maneuver by Thorn, these became the new foundation of our relationship. We fought Thorn on multiple fronts, in the market, in the press, in the courts. It was a grueling war of attrition. We were holding our own, but Thorn was elusive, always one step ahead, his attacks coming from unexpected angles. We needed a final, decisive move. One evening, exhausted, I was staring at a map of Thorn's corporate assets when a wisp of a memory surfaced. It was a trivial thing, a fragment from my first life. I was at a boring charity gala, trapped in a conversation with Liam while he tried to sound important. He'd been laughing about one of his father's rivals. "Yeah, old man Thorn," Liam had slurred, a glass of champagne tilting precariously in his hand. "Thinks he's so clever, poured a fortune into some failed land deal out in the desert. Called it a geothermal project. My dad said he was just drilling for dirt. At the time, it meant nothing, but now—" "Alistair," I said, my voice sharp with sudden realization. "Thorn's geothermal project in the Mojave. What do you know about it?" Alistair frowned. The one from 10 years ago, it was a bust. A massive write-off. Why?" "Because it wasn't a geothermal project," I said, my mind racing. "Liam called it a failed land deal. But what if it wasn't a failure? What if the land was the point? It's remote, barren, off the grid. The perfect place to hide something." It was the final key. The ghost of Liam's drunken bragging, a piece of useless information from a dead life, became our ultimate weapon. Alistair's resources descended on that patch of desert like a storm. They didn't find geothermal vents. They found a massive illegal data haven, a server farm where Thorn stored the compromised information of hundreds of corporations and politicians, his entire arsenal of blackmail and leverage. The takedown was absolute. Exposed and facing a mountain of federal charges, Marcus Thorn's empire crumbled in a day. The last, most dangerous ghost of my past had been vanquished. A week later, the city was quiet again. The war was over. I was standing on the vast balcony off the master suite, watching the city lights glitter below. I heard the soft sound of the door opening behind me. It was Alistair. He walked to my side, not speaking for a long moment. He was holding two things in his hand: our original marriage contract and a gold-plated lighter. He held out the paper. "I believe this has served its purpose," he said, his voice a low, soft rumble in the night air. The words were simple, but they held the weight of everything that had passed between us. The suspicion, the respect, the danger, the trust. The power dynamic had shifted from a transaction to a partnership, from a contract to a covenant. I took the lighter, its metal warm against my skin. A genuine, relaxed smile touched my lips, the first of its kind in this new life. I flicked the wheel, and a small, steady flame bloomed in the darkness. I started this new life with one goal: revenge, I thought, as I touched the flame to the corner of the contract. I wanted to burn down the world that wronged me. But revenge is a fire that consumes everything, even the person who lights it. I didn't just get revenge. I built an empire from the ashes. I let my fiancé sleep with my sister again. And it was the best decision I ever made. I didn't just marry the king. I became the queen. The paper curled, turning black at the edges, the legal jargon dissolving into smoke. I let it go, watching the glowing embers float away, disappearing into the vast, star-dusted sky over our city. As the last ember vanished, Alistair's hand found mine, his fingers lacing through my own. It felt like coming home.